Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining Room 4. My name is Manuel Letebele. I will be co-chairing Room 4 with Dr. Popula. Dr. Popula, if you are able to show yourself on video, please do that. It is certainly our honor to be co-chairing the proceedings in Room 4, where we will be having 4 presentations. Those presentations will be delivered by esteemed professionals who will cover a broad range of topics linking the webinar's main theme to building resilient cities. So in Room 4, we do have a co-host, like I mentioned, which is Dr. Popula. We are also supported by the rapporteur from UKZN, Mr. Eddie Muta, who will then be summarizing the proceedings of Room 4 for us so as to enable us to report back to the main webinar tomorrow. So if I may I please ask Dr. Popula to introduce himself. Afterwards, then I will proceed and introduce the first presentation, and then we'll kickstart the proceedings in Room 4. Dr. Popula, please proceed.
Morning.
Thank you. I was hoping you were going to do a short introduction about yourself. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lebele, for having me. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you. I believe Mr. Lebele has introduced me indirectly before. Hi, I'm Dr. Ayobami Popola. Function as a research fellow in the Research Chair for Inclusive City in the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And it's an honor to be the co-chair with Mr. Emmanuel Letebele in this room, Resilient City. We hope we build resilience at the end of this discussion. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Popula. Colleagues, allow me to introduce a very esteemed speaker, Dr. Kobina, who is a senior lecturer in urban planning at the Melbourne School of Design and the Faculty of Architecture, Building and Planning at the University of Melbourne in Australia. He holds a PhD in human geography with emphasis on regional planning and resource conservation. Dr. Kobina's background is in human geography with broad experience in urban and regional planning, which was gained through teaching and research conducted at universities in Ghana and Australia. Dr. Kobina has published widely in the area of African urbanism, climate resilience, adaptation, and natural resource management. He serves as the senior associate editor within the African region for the Journal of Urban Affairs. He is a member of the Planning Institute of Australia, the Ghana Institute of Planners, and also a fellow of the Global Young Academy and Ghana Young Academy. He is the University of Michigan Presidential Scholar, a visiting scholar at the Stellenbosch Institute for Advanced Study at Stellenbosch University in South Africa. He is also an adjunct research fellow of the Institute for Land, Water and Society at the Charles Sturt University in Australia. Dr. Kobina will be presenting to us on the topic linked to building urban resilience. His topic is the epistemology of the urban resilience multiscale to planning, practical initiatives through theoretical lens. With that being said, Dr. Kobina, may I please hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for the warm welcome, and also good evening, morning to those of you in Africa and Europe. It is evening time here, so apologies for saying evening. Let me share my screen quickly and share with you some of our research on urban resilience and urban planning in Africa.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So this morning, I am very delighted to be part of today's celebration of our World Planning Day. And most importantly, I'm thankful to the organizers for inviting me to be part of this. I'm going to share with you a research that I'm doing with colleagues from Harvard and University of Melbourne here on why we should think of developing an urban resilience multi-scale as an approach to planning in Africa. So that is what I'm going to share with you this morning. And I'll be happy if at the end of the talk, you engage me with questions. So first, I will talk briefly about urban development situation across African cities. Then I look at how that predisposes the continent to climate change risk. Then we look forward to ways that we can develop sustainable and adaptable cities across our continent. And I will also look at the approach that we are developing, the theoretical framework that we are developing to respond to Africa's urban development narrative. Then some conclusion. All right. So with an average annual urbanization rate of 3.3%, Africa remains the world's fastest urbanizing region. And its population has also increased from 33 million to 288 million between 1950 and 2000, the year 2000. And out of this figure, about 1.3 billion people are further expected to be living in urban areas by 2050. So this suggests that Africa is on the trajectory of becoming an urbanized continent, as we see in Europe and North America. But this rate of urbanization, as you can see from the map on your right screen, is uneven. So it is not every part of the continent that is urbanizing at the same rate. So there are different levels of urbanization across different countries. And with the most rapid urbanization occurring in the north, the west, and the southern part of Africa. So as we go through, you just have to acknowledge the fact that Africa is on the path of rapid urbanization, but this rate of urbanization is uneven across regions. And even some studies suggest that some countries are experiencing counter-urbanization. So it is not the whole of Africa that is urbanizing at a faster rate. And this urbanization rate, as we speak today, we have so many people living in urban area. We haven't crossed the 50% mark there, but we are around 43% of Africa's urban population living in urban area. And it is projected that by 2035, we should be having 45%, and by 2050, more than half of Africa's population will be living in urban areas. And if you look at the map on my extreme right-hand side, you can see from the map that the deep green areas are countries experiencing more than 4% of urbanization rate. So if this trajectory continues, then within the next foreseeable future, probably even before the 2050 projected timeline, we would hit more than 50% of the continent's population living or residing in urban areas. But it is worth acknowledging that despite the relatively high rate of urbanization occurring across the continent, it is increasingly concentrated in the cities. So it is not spread across the various countries, but the concentration of this rapid rate of urbanization is occurring within the existing major cities. So as of 2010, there were 50 of such cities across Africa, with Lagos and Cairo having more than 10 million people. That was 2010. We will look at what is happening currently and what will happen in the foreseeable future. And if you look at the map on my right, it shows the rate of increase that is expected by 2025, between 2010 and 2025. And you see that cities such as Kinshasa, Lagos, and Luanda will record relatively higher increases in their population during the period under review, that is from 2010 to 2025. So it is also important to mention that these cities are likely to experience, unprecedented growth. with annual growth rate estimated between 1.93% and 6.13% by 2025. So what does this mean for urban planning? If you look at it critically, if you are having urbanization occurring at a faster rate, and if you look at experiences of urbanization elsewhere in other continents, it should have been a good thing in that Africa's urban population is growing rapidly with mostly youthful population. So if you look at this map, we have majority of youthful population across the world. And that is very important for our industrialization purpose, our service sector, and even employment generation in general, because we have the skill labor, both on skilled and unskilled, youthful population to capitalize on to drive our development agenda. So urbanization in itself should be positive. Again, once urbanization occurs and our cities expand and form agglomeration, they in turn become centers of innovation, where creativity, where new innovation in terms of technology emerge. And that also leads to employment creation and opportunities for people to engage in sustainable practices. So urbanization provides opportunity for our continent. And again, it also, studies have shown that once urbanization occurs and we have people concentrating in cities, there's that high tendency of government to provide infrastructure to support the people who are moving into these cities. So we relatively have improved road network, health system, education system in our cities compared with the rural areas. So if urbanization will lead to more infrastructure provision, then in a sense, it is a good thing that has to be recognized and probably pursued. So why are we worried as an African continent when it comes to the issue of urbanization? We are worried because we are increasingly having cities that are characterized as mega cities, having 10 million people or more living in them. And we have cities like Cairo, cities like Lagos that are expected to hit the megacity mark. That is good, because if you look at other cities like Tokyo, they are around the same framework in terms of urbanization. So that should be regarded as a positive thing. But the mega city comes with a mega slum. Over the years, African cities have not been, many African cities, and I must admit that there are great diversities across African cities, although the urban problem seems common or seem to be identifiable across all the African cities. But in terms of their dynamics, they are different at the local level. So African cities started emerging as a result of following colonization. And colonization brought with it formal planning system and our existing planning system that was characterized as informal or traditional form of planning system. So this colonization process led to a planning system that were basically imported from the Western countries and imposed on African cities. So areas that do not basically fit within the characterized planning system is classified as informal area. And in many instances, African countries have failed to acknowledge that informality is part of our culture, is part of our way of life, and to respond to it appropriately. But many African governments have been heavy-handed in terms of dealing with informal settlement. So what happens is that the formal system that were introduced as a result of colonization couldn't really address the urban problems that we have. And the informal system, informal sector or economy emerged to respond to our need. And if you look at across Africa today, across African cities, about 80% of our economic activities are characterized as informal, characterized within the informal economy. Similarly, about 80% of the land administrative system involves some kind of traditional or tribal leadership involved participation in the adjudication and administration of those land. And we can also talk about the type of housing because of the poor financing scheme that we have across African countries and cities. in terms of supporting people with mortgage to develop according to what they describe as the modern or formal system of planning. People basically build their own houses without any government support. So in that case, informal settlement, informality has become part of African culture. Unfortunately, the governments across African cities, their approach to dealing with informality is to get rid of it because they see informality as the problem. Meanwhile, it is the same thing. It is the failure of the formal system of planning to really engage with the informality that has created the problem that exists in African cities. So the rate of informality, emergence of informal settlement across African cities, in addition to informal economic activities, and because of planning's inability to address that, given the colonial heritage history of that, it has created a situation whereby informal settlement that are not necessarily slum communities have deteriorated to that state because with increasing population, there's limited infrastructure provision, there's limited service provision in those areas. And the reality is that city planning has not been able to keep pace with the rate of growth. And as a result, areas that are informal but they were not described as slums are increasingly becoming exhibiting slummy conditions because of lack of provision of basic infrastructure and services. So these are the reasons that make us worry as planners in African cities. So if you go across African cities from Freetown in Sierra Leone through to Nairobi, through to Cape Town, you will see evidence of slum conditions. So slum conditions have become part of our cities, and in South Africa, particularly in Cape Town, it is a sharp contrast between the formalized planning system on the one side and the Khayelitsha slum on the other side. The same applies to the Kibera slum in Nairobi, Kenya, and the same applies to Sodom and Gomorrah in Ghana's capital, Accra, and Egypt. I mean, all of African cities, African cities are basically epitomized by the contrast between slum conditions and formal plan system, just because of the lack of planning ability to engage with informality and to recognize informality as a process of self-burden, self-organization that can be supported and be improved to address the increasing housing and economic need of the youthful African population. Similarly, because of planning's inability to keep pace with the rate of urbanization across African cities, urban sprawl has become synonymous with African cities. Studies that we conducted in Tanzania, for instance, we found that in cities such as Morogoro, the rate of urban expansion is twice the rate of population growth. So you can imagine, although African cities are experiencing rapid rate of population growth, there are cases whereby the rate of urban expansion itself is twice the rate of population growth, indicating the unsustainable pattern of urban development across many of Africa's urban spaces. We also have cases of poor sanitation and water supply issues across many African cities. I need not to give example of this. This is just a common feature almost across all African cities that we have studied, the Anglophone African cities that we studied as part of this project. And there is increasing rate of unemployment, especially among the youth, as a result of planning's inability to engage with informality to create many opportunities for our young people. As I indicated earlier, the informal sector contributes significantly to Africa's economy, yet it is often regarded as a nuisance or as a problem that needs to be corrected. Meanwhile, if official planning or formal planning had engaged effectively with informality, perhaps it could have been the engine of growth and probably provided more employment opportunity for the teeming unemployed youth across African cities. This situation is particularly worse in Ghana, where the government introduced what we call free senior high school education, with many young people going into the a high school system with the intention of entering university rather than some of them engaging in technical skills and vocational skill acquisition. So since last year, we've had increasing number of university graduates turning out to be unemployed because there are no opportunities within the public sector, and the private sector to the government hasn't really engaged with the informal sector to create the enabling environment to engage the teaming unemployed youth. So it is becoming really a critical issue in Ghana. And if you go to places like Lagos, places like Dar es Salaam, it appears that the colonial pattern of urban development that were left about half a century ago, continue to exist because the roads haven't been expanded. We haven't been proactive in our planning responses. So there's increasing traffic, but there's limited infrastructure provision. And also we have failed to look at alternative forms of planning. Alternative forms of transport, such as rail transport, such as water transport, in a way to facilitate movement across cities. And in cities like Lagos, for instance, and also in Accra and some part of Nairobi, they have water system. They describe as streams and rivers within the cities. I mean, that traverse the city, that in many developed countries, they could have easily used to ferry people from one location to the other. We haven't been able to capitalize on those opportunities. And instead, we tend to convert these transport opportunities into garbage dumping grounds. And also in Accra, for instance, we fill those places with dirt and bird houses and residential units on them. So the wetland, the rivers within the city are often choked with garbage, or they are filled up with dirt and they are converted into other form of land uses. And it is actually affecting the functionalities of these cities. Despite the problem of urbanization, I mean, and lack of planning, inability to engage with informality rather than seeing it as a problem, we are also in a stage that we have to deal with another major challenge, which is climate change. And studies on climate change in Africa has identified the continent as being in the eye of the climate storm. So already we are struggling with urbanization and its consequences, and now we have climate change. And unfortunately, given the already weakened system with our urbanization level, African cities are further described as being the most ill-prepared in terms of adapting to climate change because we are extremely vulnerable. Already we have vulnerable spaces due to limited infrastructure provision, basic infrastructure provision, and now we have the impact of climate change. I mean, worsening the already weakened urban planning system that we have. And if you look at the last 30 years, 10 of the worst drought disasters that occurred across the world were in Africa. And this is a very serious issue given the continent's already weakened capacity to respond to emergencies of conflict. For instance, drought disasters increased from 500,000 in 1970 to about 2 million in 2010. And this pattern is said to continue with increasing impact and severity of climate change over the years. So if you look at the map that I presented here, we tried to look at the evidence of climate change across African continent. Whether climate change is as severe as it is reported, especially on the African continent. And we looked at two cases. One was in 1950 to 1969. That was the map to my left. And let me use the color. The yellow map is the one that we conducted from 1990 to 2009. And we realized that across the African continent, it is becoming drier, precipitation is becoming more unpredictable, and when it does happen, it is very intense within a very short period of time, causing major flood events and also disasters in terms of deaths and destruction to livelihoods. So, but most importantly, it is not, when it comes to climate change, it is not an issue that affects only one part of Africa. It is a continental issue, like as it is a global issue. But we also realize that the impacts are not the same across the continent. So if you look at the map that is shown here, you realize that we have different types of impact across different parts of Africa. And you could also see from the map that most of the impacts are concentrated along the coastal area. That's where we have major African cities located across the continent. So across West Africa, the major issues that we identified included flooding, heat waves, sea level rise, and storm surges. In South Africa, in Southern Africa, we identify issues of warming and variation in weather. And the warming particularly has led to some period of droughts in a number of Southern African cities. And the most recent one was in Cape Town that led to water stress situation in the city. And in Eastern Africa, apart from issues of water shortages as a result of long drought, there's also, more importantly, food insecurity issue as a result of extended drought affecting agricultural productivity. And despite all these impacts of climate change occurring across different parts of the continent, particularly in African cities, it is further projected that it has not ended yet, but we are expected to see between 1.5 to 3 degrees Celsius increase in temperature from 2050 to 2099. So if the current situation we are already struggling with it, how are we going to manage with further stress as a result of climate change? So with the projected impact, we looked at, given the concentration of major African cities along the coast of Africa, we looked at the possible impact on a population along the coast. So we focus on low elevation coastal zone across Africa. And as you can see from this map, it shows that as days go on and as the climate change impacts continue to deliver harsh consequences on African cities, more people are going to suffer, and particularly more people in the urban areas. By 2030, we have more of such people across a number of countries that we have identified here. So it is a threat that, of course, we need to combat. So if you, with the troubles of urbanization and now climate change, if you visit African cities from Sierra Leone, Freetown, to Ghana's capital Accra, to Lagos in Nigeria, to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, Kenya, down to South Africa, it has become a common feature to see urban residents in search of water. Water has become a major important element that people really struggle to get. And in places like Ghana, it is even worse in the sense that the fresh water available through the river systems that we have, due to poor policy enforcement, people are engaging in illegal mining activities in it, further polluting it and affecting the water provision capacity of the city of Accra. So it is not just the natural climate change that is impacting on water provision or the functionality of our cities in terms of water service, but also anthropogenic factors such as urban residents converting rivers into garbage ground, converting rivers into other forms of land uses, mining in rivers, and all those factors contribute to water stress in our cities. Again, there is increasing reported cases of sea level rise across the continent. And just even this evening here, a news came up in Ghana that a coastal community has been washed away by sea level rise this morning, and the residents are seeking shelter elsewhere. And it is becoming a common feature across Africa and also the Pacific region, where I am here in Australia. And flooding is a common feature in African cities, and not just in African cities, across the world. But in our case, our studies have found that human factors or anthropogenic factors contribute about 50% of the flood event that we see. So instead of us to provide basic infrastructure to support flood management, such as a storm drain, and even the natural systems that we have, open spaces, nature reserves, wetlands that we have, because of increasing population, we tend to convert these places into residential, commercial, and other land uses. And once there is a normal downpour, it results in extensive flooding across our cities. So it is not just climate change posing flood risk to our cities, but also some of our activities contribute to that. So it is not just climate change and urbanization exhibiting themselves in the form of flooding and sea level rise and all that. It also has consequences on the health. So we looked across the globe and see, in terms of mortality risk, how climate change exhibit itself across various continents. And if you look at this map, you realize that we have relatively more red in Africa than the rest of the world. And if you take a city like Accra, it is expected to record around 1,000 deaths per every 10,000 people by 2100. Yeah, so that is the risk that climate change poses to our already vulnerable urban spaces. And these are the things that once we look at, it gives us the impetus to work very hard and to address these issues. So given all the impacts and the consequences and the characteristics of climate change and urbanization occurring within our urban environment, is it that nothing has been done on resolving this issue? No, there has been some effort to address that. And if you look at this map, these are projects that focus on either mitigation or adaptation across African cities from 2006 to 2018. And the circles indicate the amount of funding that was approved. You can see that there has been a steady investment in climate adaptation and particularly adaptation projects over the year. Unfortunately, it has been steady. It hasn't been enough to deal with the impacts of climate change across African cities. And in many cases, the amount of funding that is approved for such projects, we tend to undertake limited, less than the amount approved. And that also goes to other aspects of urban governance, bordering on corruption and all that. But my focus here is to talk about what planning can do within this space. So there has been some effort, but it has basically not been enough to prepare African cities to be resilient and adaptable in the face of rapid urbanization and climate change. So my team, we felt, and I mean, literature also agrees that there's the need for the urban problems that are produced through a multiscalar effects from climate change and urbanization. There's the need to address this through urban resilience, multi-scale conceptualization. And before we do that, we also looked at the capacity of urban planning to respond to this. And we looked at urban planning in places like Australia, Canada, US. And in fact, it's been very effective tool in addressing issues of climate change, although in terms of adapting and also supporting mitigation effort. But of course, at the moment, with the exception of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, I mean, no profession can really stop climate change from occurring. But in terms of mitigation and adaptation, urban planning plays a very important role. So we said, okay, then we have to develop a framework that is based on theory and also very practical to the African continent that would respond to the multiscalar effect of climate change and urbanization characterizing the continent. So we came up with the urban resilience multiscale, and it consists of 4 key components, and these components are not mutually exclusive, but they are interdependent. So the first one relates to the multiscalar and the historical nature of the relationship between inequality and climate change. And this one is built on the fact that Africa's urban spaces started developing or being governed through effects of colonization, whereby in some it resulted in economic segregation between resource-rich regions and resources that are with limited or no resource, regions that are with limited or no resource. Then also it resulted in spatial segregation between where the formal spaces and informal spaces, and in colonial times is where the colonialists were living and where the ordinary people or those being colonized also reside. So this historical nature has created inequality, and we still see it in our cities. And unfortunately, the urban planning tool that was employed to initially address the health issues of cities across Africa was rather used as a tool to dominate and to create segregation. So it was a tool that was used to support the development of cities for where our colonialists will live and where the ordinary people will live. So it created some form of inequality. And we argue that that multi-scalar and historical nature of inequality and climate change, and unfortunately, that effect of urban planning through colonization predispose the informal settlement and slum communities to more impact of climate change. Anytime climate events happen in cities, those are the areas that suffer the most. So our approach is that we have to look at this multi-scalar consequences of it from history in order to address inequality and climate change. And the second point under our urban resilient multi-scale is the criticality of planning to implementing equitable climate change adaptation measures. I mean, we've looked at urban climate change policies across African continent, and our understanding and conclusion is that most African cities and governments are signatory to all the major global climate pacts, from Tokyo to Paris to now Glasgow and all. They all go and showcase Africa's commitment to addressing climate change. But the reality is that when it comes to local level implementation, it is left to the people who are affected to model or to deal with the issue themselves. So we are arguing that we have to consider the position of urban planning in supporting climate change adaptation effort across Africa, rather than just using it as a tool of segregation between formal and informal spaces in our urban areas or cities. Then the third point relates to the importance of the state, the public, and international support in climate adaptation. I'll talk more about this in the subsequent section, how urban planning alone cannot deal with issues of climate change and urbanization, but those who cause climate change to be intense in terms of global emission should be held accountable to support this process of addressing climate change impact. The last one also relates to the importance of informality. We can't really govern African cities by disregarding the importance of informal settlement, informal economies, informal housing, informal land administration within our governance system. So it is about time urban planning that we practice respond to this and make sure that informality is not seen as a nuisance or as a problem, but as an opportunity to really engender Africa's socioeconomic development. Okay, so what does it really mean to engage with our concept of urban resilience multiscaler? What we are arguing is that urban planning in Africa should go beyond the colonial antics that it still relies on to confront climate change as environmental and global justice issue. And this issue affects, most importantly, livelihood, energy access, local democracy, and health of all all people living in urban areas. So it is not an issue for those who are living in formalized or planned area or modern city, and those who are living in informal or slum area. This is an issue that affects all. So in responding to that through planning, it should reflect that, there should be a reflection of both informal aspect of the city and the formal aspect of the city in terms of response strategy. So that is what we are arguing for, that the increasing focus on the formalized part of the city and limited focus on informal settlement within our urban spaces is really affecting effort towards addressing climate change, particularly with adaptation effort. And it is recognizing these multiple effects of climate change and the various levels of action that we can position ourselves as making sustainable and resilient effort towards addressing climate change. So once we are able to recognize that the issue of climate change within our already weakened urban spaces or cities borders on energy, borders on livelihoods of people, borders on democracy, because those people living in informal settlement also have a voice, and especially politicians exploit them during election time, or they are kind to them during election time. And after election, they subject them to evictions and demolition exercises. So, but we have to recognize that all these effects come together to produce climate change vulnerability in our cities, and we need to address them. But moving beyond that, and for us to ensure that we have created adaptable, flexible, and learning community that respond to climate change impacts and rapid urbanization to produce resilient spaces, we have to recognize that the global nature of climate change, because climate change is not just an African issue, an African city issue. It is actually compounded by developed countries and recently by China and India in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So we have to really recognize that it is this global, it's a global issue that is creating inequality at the local level. And so once we recognize that, we also know that wealthier countries, developed countries who are the greatest emitters or polluters, will basically face the climate change adaptation cost. That's what we have to recognize. Then poorer countries or vulnerable regions like Africa, we will have to implement these changes so that we're able to adapt to the changing climate. And as we implement interventions to adapt to climate change, we should also be dealing with climate-related death. As I showed you in the graph, more deaths are expected to occur in Africa compared to the wealthier countries. So how can we get to the state of resilience whereby those who, even as of today, after the Glasgow meeting, they still haven't made any strong commitment towards reducing emissions? How are we going to hold them accountable? Whilst regions like Africa that we produce less than 5% of global emissions, we are severely impacted by climate change. How are we going to hold those who are emitting greenhouse gas responsible? So we went further through our multi-scale approach to indicate that it is time that we introduce urban climate reparation. And this is not a one-off donor aid to African cities to compensate them for the wrong that they developed or the emitters of greenhouse gas emission have done. But as African cities grow, we've recognized that infrastructure is a major challenge, from housing, transport, to energy, sanitation, and even our food system requires substantial funding. So the climate reparation provides a framework whereby African cities will be continually supported through those who emit, for them to be able to fund important infrastructure projects that they need to really adapt to the impact of climate change. So climate reparations would constitute more than one-off cash payment or transfer that symbolizes growth or apology, but it will act as an ongoing structural solution to long-term effects of climate change and its disproportionate effect on our vulnerable population. So a reparatory approach seeks to understand which harms were committed and how through structural change those harms can be addressed. So already it is well known that climate change impacts in terms of anthropogenic causes are basically led by the developed countries. So they have to be held responsible in supporting local communities that are really struggling to adapt through no fault of theirs to really be in a better position to respond and also survive. Without such, most African cities will become uninhabitable in the foreseeable future. So in conclusion, what our research shows is that Africa is a diverse continent with diverse cities. Irrespective of the diversity, there are common challenges that cut across the various cities. And when we are supposed to respond to the challenges of climate change and urbanization, we've identified urban planning to be a tool to help us address that through local, national, and global scale. And this urban planning as a tool goes beyond the colonial approach to urban planning that resulted in segregation and some form of economic segregation as well, economic and spatial segregation. But this one goes beyond that, and it connects local efforts, which are mostly being led by the vulnerable people themselves in terms of adapting to climate change, to global effort in terms of global policies and global agendas that support climate effort. So once we can't really tackle climate change in African cities with just bottom-up or top-down approach. The two has to work together because those who are most impacted by climate change are in a position that they can't really adapt without support. And we can also look up to international organizations to do everything for us. So it should be a top-down and bottom-up approach in managing addressing climate change impact. And we consider urban planning to be key in connecting the local, national, and the global scale in addressing the challenge of urbanization and climate change in Africa. And our multi-scale resilience framework emphasizes the importance of urban planning, of thinking across scales rather than just focusing on top-down or bottom-up approach. So we think across scale, what is happening in local community or vulnerable communities at the city level, at the national level, and how that connect with global agendas on climate change. And that will support us to highlight the importance of vulnerable communities in the planning process, but not a professional activity that is being imposed on communities across African cities. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for listening to my presentation on African urbanization and climate change and the need for us to adopt urban resilience multi-scale. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Kobina, for your insights. A good presentation that took us on a journey, really, covering broad topics from urban development in African cities, dealing with urbanization challenges in different African cities. But I think largely what stood out for me is what you mentioned in your presentation, that Africa is in the eye of the climate storm, and Africa is struggling with urbanization challenges, and coupled with those challenges, now we have a climate change challenge to add to the set of challenges. Colleagues, I think the platform is created so as to ensure that you engage with the content of Dr. Kobina's presentation. May I extend that opportunity to you to either raise questions or comment based on his presentation. We will note the hands as they are being raised, but also as my co-chair indicated, you can also post your questions on the chat platform. First up, let's give Katu Muruba an opportunity to either comment or raise a question. And may I request that those who are having sort of similar needs to either comment or raise a question, please do that because we will be lining up the second presenter once we have dealt with the question and answer session. Katu Muruba, the platform is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. And also thank you to the great presentation that was actually presented to us. My question is mainly based on what the speaker was actually alluding to when he said there's a lack of planning abilities in Africa. So my question was to say, is it really a lack, or is it a context issue, or a timing issue, or risk management issue, or the disconnection between, or understanding between, the urban and rural linkages? What are these abilities? What do we mean by lack of planning abilities? Because I wouldn't think that it's only Africa that has, or maybe there are best practices as well, maybe perhaps in Africa as well too, we would never know. Is it a capacity issue? What do we mean by disabilities? It's just one of the questions I had when he started the presentation, to say, okay, there's a lack of planning abilities, but is it leading to sprawl? Is that really what's happening? Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Katu. Dr. Kobina.
Respond? Okay. Thanks a lot, Maruba, for your question. That's a very interesting one. The reality is that planning in Africa was really, that official form of planning in Africa was really instigated or brought about as a result of colonization. Okay. And the unfortunate aspect of colonization is that the planning practice introduced did not really suit our socio-economic context. And that led to what now has become formal and informal agreement across African urban spaces. We believe strongly that if planning had engaged with our social cultural context and understood how African cities function, at the moment, we wouldn't be talking about formality and informality in African cities. Planning would have made way to support what it would normally regard as informal settlement to survive. Because people are building their own houses, their own businesses and all that. And those are not government sanctioned, and they can be characterized as formal intervention, formal housing or formal intervention. But they are, in a way, not slum housing or slum informal economic activities too. Okay, so if planning had responded to our local context, we would be able to support informal, what we characterize as informality in terms of informal settlement, informal economic activity, to really leverage the opportunities that African cities offer in order to respond to the many problems that we face. And unfortunate aspect is that planning schools in Africa continue to teach colonial form of planning. And we continue to teach our students that in terms of planning practice, informal settlements are problems. We need to demolish them. We need to evict people. We need to not to capture them and all that. And informal economic activities are not on government formal systems, so they are not important. We don't provide support for them in terms of space, in terms of loans, financial incentive and all that. We don't provide those support. So it is more of individuals trying to survive within an increasingly difficult urban space. Okay, so the problem, as you mentioned, it is not that we lack the capacity, but the understanding of what planning is in an African city is what we are lacking. At the moment, planning schools in many African cities that I have visited, particularly in Nigeria, Ghana, and Kenya, and probably South Africa, I'm not very sure, still talk about master plan and all the technical activities that are being undertaken by professionals with very limited engagement of local people. But our level of planning should move beyond that and understand the dynamism in terms of how do residential areas differ from working areas or economic centers. In Africa, we can have one house that is both a residential zone and also a place for commercial activity, which normally in planning practice, there should be a separation between work area, sleeping area, and recreation area. Okay, so we haven't come to a point that we understand that indeed this is what we need in Africa. And unfortunately, as I mentioned, apart from planning education being led by Western concepts that do not really reflect our case, we have planning interventions that are also being led by foreigners who don't even understand our context. Can talk about UN Habitat intervention in supporting slum upgrading and all that across African cities, but there hasn't been any major outcome of such intervention. Why? Because the people who are even living it do not understand our culture, do not understand our way of life, do not understand how we value ourselves. I mean, mostly they see land as a commodity, but we have attached cultural value to land. We see land more than a financial commodity. Okay, so I would say that the problem that we have is lack of understanding and appreciating what African cities are. And we are just struggling to model our cities to be like European or North American cities. Meanwhile, our cities have their own identity that we have to work hard to reflect and to show to the world. I hope I've been able to answer you, Maruba.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I was. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Kobina. We thank you very much for your insights. And without possibly being biased to your presentation content, I was also struck by your thinking regarding climate reparations, but I think that's a discussion for another day. Allow me, colleagues, to move on in our day's proceedings and introduce to you the second presenter in room 4. Perhaps let me then take this question. Bruce Moyo, let it be the last question, colleagues, because we're trying to manage time without stifling input. So let me take this hand, then I will then proceed and introduce the next speaker. Bruce Moyo, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation from the presenter. My question is somehow in general. You know, it also goes to the listeners in general. They can answer if they can. My question is that, do you believe that town planning is a scarce skill in Africa at large? That is why probably the town planning profession is failing to deliver its mandate. Do you believe that it is a scarce skill? We still lack town planners in the continent. For example, here in South Africa, we have town planning listed in the list of critical skills, scarce skills in the country. So do you think we still lack enough professionals in South Africa and in the continent at large, which is somehow contributing to the failures here and there in the profession, you know, executing its functions in the society? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bruce. I will be quick on this so that the next presenter will have the stage. Town planning used to be on a critical list, skill shortage list. That was prior to the 1990s, I guess. And since then, there have been several universities across almost all the Anglophone countries that we study, from South Africa through to West Africa, that they've introduced town planning courses. Some call it town and regional planning, others call it community and regional planning, others refer to as human settlement planning across several universities in Africa. And let me take just Ghana as an example. They introduced town planning courses, I think, in 2009 at universities in Ghana. And up to now, it's been one of the major planning courses that is offered across universities in Ghana. We still have shortage of planners because in Ghana, there is what we call district assembly. Instead of city councils, we have districts. So ideally, there should be about 3 to 4 planners working in a district. But at the moment, we have 1 planner per district. And even with that, some districts are without a planner. So we have 1 planner performing functions across multiple districts. And that is not because of lack of skilled planners. It's because of government conditions in terms of employment. So we have planners who have completed their university degrees, done internship, national service programs and all that, and waiting to be employed so that they will work across our district. But the government is not giving clearance for them to be employed just because the government or public payroll is full. So we need them. And this is not only planners, it's across healthcare workers and also teachers. We have teachers who are sitting home, but we don't have teachers who are teaching kids in schools in Nigeria, Kenya, and Ghana. Okay, just because the government is not ready to employ them. So it is not just an issue of skilled lack of skill personnel, but it goes to governance, which I don't want to talk about because it will go into issues of politics and although planning is a political activity, we go into politics and corruption and all that characterize African cities. But I'm trying to focus on planning. So at this point, there is no shortage of planners in Africa. There's no shortage. We have a lot of planners, and in many cases, they've gone into other fields, operating as development practitioners, consultants, and all that, because they can't find space within the government framework or the government system that they can support planning effort. And in other cases where they find places to work within the government, they are frustrated to the point that they can't even make any appreciable impact within the urban space. So, I mean, it's governed basically by politics. So if you want to really make a change or impact in the urban space, the politicians will stifle your effort. And at the end, you will just be working there as a worker of the government institution, as a planner. But in terms of making real-time impact in the lives of people, there will be none because it is full of politics. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Kobina. We really appreciate your presentation and your willingness to share your insights on this platform. Allow me to introduce the second presenter, Dr. Ilyasu, who is an urban planner and landscape architect. He holds a bachelor degree of urban and regional planning, a master's in tourism and recreation planning from Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria in Nigeria, a PhD in landscape architecture from University Science Malaysia, USM, Pulau Penang, that is in Malaysia. His research interest is in the areas of urban housing and quality of life, urban landscape planning and design, urban morphology and design, crime prevention through urban design, and he is presently a graduate research assistant at the School of Housing, Building and Planning at the University Science Malaysia. Dr. Ilyasu, the platform is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Emmanuel. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Dr. Ilyasu.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my screen. Okay, sorry, I cannot share my screen.
Please let me know what type of assistance do you need?
Yeah, I cannot share my screen.
Okay, do you need me to share it on your behalf and then you give me prompts when to move between screens?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, please bear with me.
Okay.
Okay, coming just now.
Musa, are you able to assist? I just got a return message that I'm unable to share a presentation. We
I will
send the presentations through to Koliso.
He should be made co-host. Just make him co-host, then he will share.
Make who?
Mr. Eliasu Idris.
Okay. Okay, I'm with you.
He will make you co-host now so that you'll be able to share your screen from there.
Okay, I should make a...
Musa will make you co-host, then you'll be able to share.
Okay.
Just make him co-host. He should be able to share.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Will I be able to share? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Can you see my screen, please?
Yes, Dr. Eliasu, please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Good morning to you all. I am highly delighted for giving this opportunity to share my thoughts at this very great occasion and day, celebrating the World Planning Day. I'm most grateful to the organizers and the conveners. As I'm being introduced, I'm Idris Isa Ilyasu. I'm from Landscape Architecture Program, School of Housing, Building and Planning, University of Science, Malaysia. My title of my presentation is Building Resilient Cities Through Planning for Urban Growth. Yeah, in a form of introduction, my introduction has been taken care of by the last presentation, but I have one thing to share with all of us in the form of a discussion rather than just a paper presentation. So you will bear with me that my presentation is largely going to be like a sharing of thought, raising of so many issues rather than presenting the issues to you. The UN Habitat in 2006 by the then Executive Secretary, Dr. Carlos, raised an issue that has to do, that's very significant with respect to the issue of city resilience. And he said, and I quote him, "Designing a city is beautiful, making it sustainable is great, but making it all that and resilient is great, is getting closer to perfection in urban planning." So yeah, if the thinking is that if we want to achieve a beautiful city, then that city should be made in a sustainable way. And in so doing, we should be able to instill sort of resilience that can convert this kind of scenario, combat this kind of scenario, set a deterrence against this kind of scenario, coordinate the activities of humanity with the interaction of the natural environment. And that sort of arrangement and organization can best be sorted out through planning. With cities accounting for about 75% of greenhouse gas emissions globally, 53% of global cities will be highly vulnerable to serious and near-term climate change effects by 2050. The developing world has been slow to respond to urban concerns and to fully appreciate the level of interdependent relationship between cities and their ecological footprints. This has to do with our culture and the perspectives at which regionally in Africa, we look at urban planning in the context of environmental management, in the context of environmental determinism. And that also has to do with our levels of understanding and readiness to assume planning for habitation in our cities. The challenges in poor urban settlements are intensified by the mountain hazards associated with extreme weather, lack of urban continuum and planning tools to make cities sustainable and resilient to shocks and stresses. Yes, several researches has established that several cases, several projects across African cities conducted by UN Habitat and different bilateral and multilateral research organizations. I was able to establish that, yeah, our inability to address some of the climatic issues, some of the global frameworks is because our urban planning system is inherited system. It is a colonial base, as observed by the previous speaker. And we need to do a lot of more to localize some of the thoughts, to localize some of the perspectives, to localize some of the theories, as we will be discussing subsequently. The notion of resilient cities is based on the capacities of cities to respond and adapt to changing circumstances. This has emerged over recent years in recognition of the challenges posed by climate change, disaster events, rapid urbanization, and the economic downturn. The purpose of my presentation, as I earlier said, is the first is to inform. What do we mean by we talk about resilience? Yes, we need to understand resilience as a framework, as an action needed for effective urban planning that will be developing, reorganizing our cities in a sustainable manner, and also to review. By reviewing, we answer the question of what's the current state of play in urban resilience, especially in African context. And for all of us to round around and discuss how can we build resilient cities in Africa. Now, what is resilience? A resilient city can adapt to a variety of changing conditions and withstand shocks while still providing essential services to its residents, as observed by World Bank. Resilience is the ability to withstand and recover quickly from any plausible shock and stress and maintain continuity of services as established or defined by UN Habitat. Resilience is the capacity of individuals, communities, and systems to survive, adapt, and grow in the face of stress and shocks, and even transform when conditions require it, as defined by Rockefeller Foundation. Now, we find out that there are a lot of literatures that are bringing a sort of confusion between the DRR, which is the disaster risk reduction, and resilience. So we try to set the thin line that divides the two. When we are talking about DRR, which is disaster risk reduction, it's often used in context of natural hazards, while resilience covers natural and man-made threats, mitigate or reduce existing threats, while resilience avoid creation of new risk. DRR also looks at the possibility of avoiding losses, humans and physical, while resilience looks at creating value in a city system by realizing the resilience dividend. So in general, or in notion, resilience used in this context focuses on future integrated development planning targets to increase the resilience and measure progress. Now, we are talking about resilience, urban resilience. So we have to relate resilience with the context, within the context of urban system or urban system approach. Now, the urban system is exposed to political hazards, social hazards, economic hazards, technological hazards, and natural hazards. And for all these contexts of hazards, the resiliency is expressed in terms of either organizational resilience, spatial resilience, physical resilience, or functional resilience. Now, there are several organizations and research hubs that develop different resilience toolkits or guidelines, or what we call tools. The Cities Trained Resilient Cities Program, the UNISDA, which is the Disaster Resilience Score card for cities, the Carbon Climate Registry, and the City Resilience Index, all provided the working tools to assess resilience in cities and provide shield against those plausible shocks and possible future disasters. And there is a road to resilience after Paris. And one of the roads is the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, which one of the key goals from that agenda is Goal 11, which seeks to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. The standardized framework for disaster risk reduction, which defines and provides the global framework for disaster risk management in cities. World Humanitarian Summit at Istanbul, and the Quito UN Habitat Convention of 2016, which localized the urban resilience issue at the local government level. Urban resilience is the capacity of individuals, communities, institutions, businesses, and systems within a city to survive, adapt, and grow, no matter what kinds of chronic stresses and acute shocks they experience. Both 100 Resilient Cities and Maryland Institute of Urban Management believe that unplanned urban expansion is a root cause of many resilient challenges cities face in Africa and globally. Increased levels of informality, lack of service provision, decreased social equity, traffic congestion, environmental degradation, and increased disaster risk exposure are all symptoms of uncontrolled expansion in cities experiencing rapid growth. Yes, when you have vulnerabilities, it's a symptom. Vulnerabilities or risk variables in city system are indicators of planning weakness, indicators of planning failure in a city system, whether that failure or weakness is informed by poor or lack of effective urban governance of administrative frameworks or lack of adequate planning skills or technical skills to address the emerging planning issues, or absence of effective and functional planning legislations and regulations in place to address issues at city level before the cities become unmanageable. Now, the City Resilience Framework as established by the Sendai Framework of Disaster Risk Management. There are basically 12 drivers as defined by the City Resilience, and I believe we can see, despite it's not so much very clear, but I'm trying to take us around. From we have 12 fundamental determinants of cities' abilities to withstand shocks. Therefore, city to be able to instill resilience, to be able to absorb, adapt, and recover as the shock or as the heat of disaster happens or occur, should have these 12 variables or drivers in place to be able to be termed as a resilient city. The city must be able to meet basic needs of its residents, supports livelihoods and employment, ensure public health services, promotes cohesive and engaged communities, ensures social stability, security, and justice, foster economic prosperity, provides and enhances natural and man-made assets, ensures continuity or critical services, or ensures continuity of critical services, provide reliable communication and mobility, promotes leadership and elective management, provide leadership and effective management, empowers a broad range of stakeholders, fosters long-term and integrated planning. Now, this is where we come. Fosters long-term and integrated planning. This is where this paper is centered at. And for that to happen, an urban expansion plan is a long-term plan upon which other planning efforts can build. So we need an urban expansion plan, which we'll be discussing subsequently. The concept of resilient cities. The discourse of disaster risk reduction has shifted in recent years to the concept of resilience. Yes, we have seen that being reflected in the emerging researches and emerging conclusions of findings and outcomes of projects across global cities. That there is a paradigm shift from DRR to resilience, defined in various ways by UN agencies, international NGOs, think tanks, academics, and others. All these definitions see resilience as one, the notional opposite of vulnerability. B, or two, the ability to recover from catastrophic events or chronic events. Three, the capacity to improve or grow after despite a disaster event, and intricately linked with other critical development areas and priorities. Now, planning urban resilience is tantamount to planning for urban resilience. Now, planning for urban growth is planning for urban resilience. So what do we mean by that? Now we have a small annotation here. The analysis of 2100, the 2100 resilient cities shows that on average, these cities have doubled in population and have tripled in area in the past 30 years. Now, if you have a population of 2, you require this area. When you multiply by 3, the area keep on expanding. So as the population continues to grow, so as the space, consumption rate also increases. In many cases, this growth has led to the rapid proliferation of urban informal settlements and disorderly and disconnected growth. With an average of 42% of the new development occurring informally and in unplanned areas, cities are continuing to grow, with cities projected to again double in population and more than triple in area over the next 30 years by 2050. We are anticipating urban explosion by 2050. Communities on the periphery of cities often experience the most profound negative impact from this growth, putting this population at greater risk. Yes, we know urban fringes, what do you call the urban fringe, the urban periphery of cities are bedeviled with expansion and poor infrastructure, amenities and facilities, and in a short while, they metamorphosize and becomes bigger slums, and they set in a risk, vulnerability risk for disaster to hit. Addressing the root cause as opposed to the symptoms of unplanned urban growth will lead to multiple benefits and help each city survive, adapt and thrive in the face of the shocks and stresses it may face, and improve the development trajectory and well-being of its citizens. Now, how do we plan for urban resilience? Yeah, we need a paradigm shift. We need a change of thinking from reactive planning. This is a scene of Kano just recently, some 2 months ago. There was heavy rain downfall, and the entire central corridor that divides the metropolitan Kano generates a serious hurdle and immobility hurdle. So you can see thousands of vehicles and mobility system have jam-packed because the road becomes unpassable. You can't pass through because of the road has been blocked by run-ups. So we need to change our thinking of planning. Our planning should be ahead of our issues. We should be able to foresee the possibility of having issues in a defined period of time, looking at those parameters and opportunities that are presented in our cities, to be able to be proactive planners. We should plan our cities in a proactive way, as in this case. So we should anticipate scenario, and we should provide for those scenarios as the projections or as the thinking goes along. Now, proactive planning, how? Proactively planning for urban expansion is essential to achieve inclusive and resilient urban growth for cities, experiencing rapid urban growth on the order of 2% annual population growth. That is the benchmark given by UN Habitat. Now, proactive planning is, we are expecting the city to grow, to expand over a period of time. So make a plan that will accommodate that growth. The plan that will provide sufficient and enough infrastructure facilities, amenities and services as the city grows. The challenge for a fast-growing city is to make room for its inevitable expansion, based on realistic projections of its future land needs to accommodate the city's population growth in an orderly and sustainable manner. Preparation for an urban expansion plan for cities cannot be overemphasized. Now, what then is urban expansion planning? An urban expansion plan is designed to accommodate the city's future population growth with a minimum number of cost-effective measures that can be implemented immediately on a 30-year time horizon at least. The basic approach involves securing the land needed for arterial roads, basic infrastructure, and public open spaces before urban development happens. That is basically the anticipation from and urban expansion plans. Expansion plans and master plans are complementary because any new planning exercise needs to be synchronized with the existing plans. Now, I try to showcase some scenario of expansion planning. Here on my left, you see Addis Ababa. Now, urban footprint in 2017 was taken, and by projection, an expansion is anticipated by 2050. And this is the old city. This is in red, in yellow is the expansion that is anticipated or expected to happen or take place by the year 2050. So this will enable the city management system or the administration to be able to be ahead of the needs of the city by 2050. The same thing with Accra. If you look at on this side, you see the footprint was taken, the urban footprint was taken by 2014, and by 2050, it's expected to expand to this extent. Now, population Addis Ababa is projected to increase by 3.4-fold, and area will increase by 6.6-fold by 2050, while the population Accra is projected to increase 2-fold, and the area will increase 3.9-fold by 2050. So this is sufficient information, sufficient enough to enable us as planners to effectively plan for the anticipated growth that will take place in the two areas. And next is in Kigali. You can see the population in Kigali is projected to increase 3-fold, and the area will increase by 5.9-fold. So the population increases in 3-fold, while the consumption in terms of the space will increase by 5.9-fold. So while in the case of Amman, which is Jordan, population was projected to be increased by 1.4-fold, and the area is expected to increase by 2.4-fold. Okay, sorry. In Quito, in 2017, you can see the projected area is 1.6-fold, and the area will increase by 3.1-fold by 2050, while in Malacca, which is traditional or what they call the UNESCO site of interest in Malaysia, is projected to increase by 1.6-fold, and the area is to be increased by 3-fold by 2050. Now, urban growth pattern and densification or expansion. So there are issues. Is urban growth pattern defined by densification or by expansion? So we want to use this scenario to really actually see what really defines urban growth pattern in our cities. Now, cities often want to limit or constrain physical expansion. Yeah, like through master planning. You set a city limit, 2.5 kilometers from the city center, 45 kilometers from the city center, 60 kilometers from the city center. We are setting limit. We are constraining limit of expansion. But unfortunately, the city grows beyond the set out boundaries. Some cities like to believe that all future population growth will be absorbed by densification of the existing area, and there are obviously many social, economic, and environmental benefits to density. Yeah, we think that, okay, no problem. We can constrain, set out the boundary while we intensify development within the set out bounds. Not taking the cognizance of the variables that defines the growth and development of cities, which are defined in their social, economic, and environmental context. But how much of a city's population growth is typically absorbed through densification versus expansion? This remains a question. A global analysis of 200 cities over 30 years found out that 40% of growth took place through infill and densification. That is, through electrification, through urban renewal. We redensify the existing core areas of our cities, and we convert brown areas or green areas to a sort of developments via urban infill or urban densification system. And 60% took place through urban expansion. So you can see that that it is not really densification that defines the growth pattern in the city, the growth syndrome in the city, but largely the urban expansion. Cities in less developed countries.
It's now 11:30 a.m.
Sorry for that. Cities in less developed countries tend to have a greater share of growth taking place through expansion. Now, for instance, we take Lagos and Paris as a case. In 2015, a study was done and a comparison was made between Lagos, Nigeria, and Paris in France. As at then, Lagos was having a population of 11.4 million people with a city GDP of 58 billion US dollars, while the Paris as at then 2015, the population was taking 12.2 million, while the city GDP was taken as 557 billion US dollars. So what is the basis of comparison here? Now, the Paris has almost the same population, but 10 times the GDP as that of Lagos, you can see. So Paris, the difference is just 0.2 million people. So almost same with Lagos as I did. But it has more than 10 times, it is richer more than 10 times than Lagos. As a consequence of Paris had 3.5 times the urban extent of Lagos. So you can see Paris is able to grow wider than Lagos. Despite that, apart from the GDP, and the GDP enables Paris city administration to be able to provide enough infrastructures, services, facilities, and amenities needed for the growth, for the expansion. But possibly Lagos is a constraint because of the paucity of funds and the inability to provide the installations for urban expansion. Now, what are the benefits of proactive planning? The impacts of proactive planning to the building of resilient cities. Planning proactively for urban expansion and investing ahead of the curve, which is the urban shade, by implementing a municipal action program to make room for future growth, has the following durable impacts on the city's development. One, it makes cities inclusive and affordable to grow or affordable to expand. Two, it enables the city system to instill effective disaster risk management framework. It provides or makes cities very affluent in terms of availability of access and public transport systems that facilitates the integration of labor markets or work areas, residence areas, as well as recreational and other areas across the cities. It also makes greater benefits at lower cost. Yes, it makes greater benefits at lower cost. And what are the prevailing challenges for proactive planning? Yes, fundamentally, leaders of many rapidly growing cities, largely African cities or Anglo-African cities, often underestimate the amount of land needed to accommodate urban expansion. For instance, here in Nigeria, you hardly approach any agency or government body which is responsible for urban planning and country and regional development that will be able to tell you this is the amount of expansion, or this is the quantum of expansion we're anticipating, possibly because of paucity of data and the poor governance system and the laxity on the side of the practitioners, the professional planners as well. Failure to make the minimum preparations necessary to guide their expansion because of budget concern and other pressing issues. Yes, there are fund issues also, as we cited in the case of Lagos and Paris. We need the expansion for us to be able to achieve effective proactive planning. By planning for expansion, we should be able to acquire or make create huge investment opportunities for our cities to triumph. However, since urban expansion is inevitable in most fast-growing cities, it is 3 to 9 times cheaper to prepare for this expansion before it occurs than to try to retrofit neighborhoods after they have been built. Now, in summary, the basic problems bedeviling our cities with respect to effective and proactive planning for urban growth is one, poor governance and administrative frameworks. 2, management of the cities, data gathering and forecasting tools. Yes, we have very poor city management systems. We have so many, what do you call it? Conflicting agencies, conflicting frameworks, and the data is not available. And we have been using unsophisticated forecasting tools or skills and techniques, which we need to shift away from if at all we want to achieve effective, resilient cities in our context. Financing for resilience is very important. The last speaker also raised that issue. So it's a huge problem as well. There are a lot of attempts that were made in African cities. In Nigeria, our major problem is providing sufficient funds for planning for over resilience. Yes, we have the institutions, we have the administrative setup, but the problem is funding. And there are also lack of sustainable urban planning. Yes, our planning system is unsustainable. Yeah, as observed by the last speaker, and also some of the issues that were raised in terms of questions. Yeah, probe into that issue. Our urban planning system mechanism is an inherited system. It's a colonial base. Up to now, we don't have the basic African city theory or theoretical framework that defines our cities. Well, yeah, and that is why we find it very difficult. At what level our city system is informal? At what level is formal? And who defines the informality of our cities? We are supposed to be the ones to define our city system, whether they are formal or informal. As we know that over 60% of African cities are driven by informal economic sector. So our cities largely are informal in nature. Now, in conclusion, urban planning plays a major role in every aspect of the city, from inception to management. Diagnosis of problems, treatment, and revival, and along the lines, risks are foreseen and averted. This presentation discusses the trends and concepts of resilience from broad perspectives and backgrounds to the prospects of leveraging on planning for urban growth in building the capacities of cities to attain resilience. The discussion set out the platform for further deliberations. As I said, I'm not going to present a paper, it's just I'm going to raise issues for us to discuss on the emerging issues in building resilient cities for sustainable human habitat. Thank you for your audience.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ilyasu, for the presentation. And thank you certainly for taking us through your journey as you presented your work. I think what stood out, and I think it was quite an interesting quote for me, was the quote that read, "Designing a city is beautiful, making it sustainable is great, but making it all that and resilient is getting closer to perfection in urban planning." And how do we all dream about such a scenario wherein our work can result in beautiful cities, sustainable cities, as well as resilient cities. So thank you certainly for your insights and the great work that you've presented. Colleagues, the platform is yours. As Dr. Ilyasu stated, that this is really a thought-provoking session, so certainly he seems ready and willing to engage. So may I please get a sense of who has a comment or question? I take it that Bruce Moyo has a question or comment, given that your hand is up.
I think this is an old hand. Sorry, bro. I think this is an old hand, Chair.
No, thank you for that. That's fine. Yes, so I think, colleagues, please, I've also extended an opportunity for questions to be posed on the chat platform, and I'm going to read what has been posted on the chat platform. I think it's for noting in terms of a pre and post-COVID condition. What are the necessary conditions required in a digital economy or smart cities for growth when there's an increasing gap between inequality, jobs, or economic recovery in general within urban design? Dr. Ilyasu, I hope you got that question. If you need further clarity, it's on the chat platform. Please, if you can, respond to that as we determine who has a comment or question next. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Emmanuel. I had an issue with my network, so I was not able to take the question. Can the question be repeated, please?
Certainly.
Hello? Okay.
Yes, Dr. Ilyasu, I'm going to repeat the question.
Okay.
It reads as follows. Taking note of the pre and post-COVID conditions, what are the necessary conditions required in a digital economy or smart cities for growth when there's an increasing gap between inequality, jobs, or economic recovery in general within urban design? I think that's the question. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. I think to allow to that, as we said, there should be a paradigm shift in the way and manner we plan our cities and we see our cities. There is a global shift in city design and city management system. The city should be more inclusive in the such a way that look at the vulnerability issues in terms of stresses, shocks that are presented in the form of pandemics, endemics, diseases, and the well-being of the people. So the planning for health and designing for health of cities becomes a very strong issue. Should define the focus of planning and designing cities in Africa. And in the context of smart city system, yes, the concept has presented several challenges in the African context. For instance, if you are talking about building smart city, which is based on the IoT, the Internet of Things, you need energy, you need cyber system, you need strong internet network system. When you bring that kind of framework here in Nigeria, in the global West and in Asia where I am presently, it works. It's perfect. It goes along, fit into their system. They have energy 24/7 throughout the century. You can spend the entire 100 years using single blackout. There's strong Internet of Things going on, and the city system is becoming more smarter. But when you come back to African context, you find out that the electricity is not even there. The internet services as provided by the services subscribers, the GSM facilities, it's not moving well. And you have large chunk of population living in a very remote areas who
Dr. Ilyasu, can you hear us?
I believe he's frozen. The network is squashed.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Popula. Apologies for the break in the network, colleagues. Perhaps this is the point at which I need to sort of give further guidance to how the proceedings will run for the course of the day. We had intended to take a break after this presentation and then resume at 1 o'clock, wherein we will be receiving 2 further presentations. After lunch, Dr. Popula will then take over the chairing of the sessions, and I will be providing him with support in the background. So, colleagues, I think with that being said, and seeing that we lost connectivity with Dr. Ilyasu, may I propose, if he is unable to respond, may I propose that we take a break, resume proceedings at 1 o'clock sharp, where Dr. Popula will be driving the program forward. Thank you.
Chair, may I say this before we go? Colleagues?
Yeah, please.
You wouldn't want to miss our 2 other presentations. Mrs. Siwe will be speaking to us about issues that are very close to our heart and very key to resilience. And also Dr. Okola will be speaking about flood resilience in Africa. He has an expertise with regards to flood disaster planning and the likes. You wouldn't want to miss the next in the next minute. We have about 16 minutes. So we encourage you to also meet us back so that we could finish this conversation. And some of the questions that both raised, which are both, I believe by then, if Dr. Elias is still around, he will engage you. And some of them we will have them as a discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, colleagues. Please ensure that you stay muted and connected, given that we're having some connectivity issues, but we're looking forward to see you shortly in 15 minutes. Thanks.
Colleagues, good afternoon once again from here, Durban, South Africa. I am Hayobami Popola. I've been co-chairing this room with Mr. Emmanuel Letebele. Good afternoon once again. We've had two presentations earlier by Dr. Patrick Obina from the University of Melbourne, and also our colleague from the University of University, Malaysia, Dr. Lia Suhida. Two presentations have provoked our thought on issues around resilient city. And we are ready to have the remaining 2 doses that will make it a full dose of the vaccine on resilient city. I hope everyone can hear me clearly wherever you are. Can we hear me?
Yes, we can, Dr. Popola.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Due to the condition that we find ourselves here, there will be load shedding in South Africa in about an hour's time, where Ms. Siwe is, and also Dr. Okola also. May I kindly request that the two presenters cut their presentation time to about 15 minutes each. So that will give us another 30 minutes to have a collective questioning. That is, after your presentation, we will not entertain questions. Once Ms. Siwe presents, also Dr. Okola will present thereafter. Then we come back to take the question. And hopefully, before the time comes, we'll have finished engaging on questions such that the load shedding will not cut us off. Is that fine, colleagues? Ms. Siwe, is that fine by you and Dr. Okola?
Yes, that works for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It is perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll quickly go to Ms. Siwe's biography. Siwe Notobela is a researcher in the Inclusive City Program at South African City Networks. Our point of interest is in urban agenda lies in the ability for communities' voice to be activated to fundamentally drive co-created spaces. Our current work at the South African City Network is in facilitating the visualization studios across South African major cities to bring together multidisciplinary urban actors to develop future city visuals on how the ideal of spatial transformation could manifest itself in South African context. Colleagues, Ms. Siwe's presentation is titled Sustainable and Resilient City. This afternoon, colleagues, can we welcome Ms. Siwe to give us a presentation. Over to you, Ms. Siwe.
Okay, thank you. I was just trying to turn my video on. Can you see me?
Yes, we can.
We can see you.
Oh, you can see me. Perfect. Thank you. Oh, okay. Thank you, colleagues. And I'm really honored actually to be presenting with my fellow panelists today. So yeah, really appreciate the opportunity and really looking forward to the discussion. So as I've been introduced, my name is Siwe Ntombela. I'm a researcher at the South African Cities Network, which is an organization of organizations. We are a collective of our metros in South Africa, and you can see them on the bottom of the screen there. And our work is really about promoting high performing and innovative cities that are well-governed, productive, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. So that's really in terms of our vision of where we want to see the work that we are doing contributing towards. And the mission is really about building better cities by transforming policy practice through knowledge creation. So it's really about generating knowledge and research from the perspective of practitioners and developing a practitioner-centric knowledge system where we can inform policy based on practice and how to improve in that stage, but also co-creation with our cities and really listening in and learning and fostering innovation and partnerships through this convening of voices that we are really priding ourselves on. And we really value listening in terms of the kinds of research that we develop is really based on listening into practitioners that we work with across municipalities in really understanding how we can have knowledge in action and using practice to improve the kinds of knowledge practices that we have within our planning system. And it's really about shared learning for cities to also be able to share and learn from each other and just fostering partnerships and innovation. So that's really about who we are in terms of our values and mission. And really the mandate is about supporting cities to become learning and adapting institutions through knowledge, co-creation, dissemination, and application. And really a lot of our work is also about strengthening existing partnerships with cities and existing partners in terms of forming new strategic partnerships that can assist us with our mandate. And a lot of our work is really about advocating for the urban agenda by enabling cities to have a voice. I know in South Africa, we have a 3-tier system where we have the national, provincial, and local government system. And a lot of the time we are dedicated as the cities network to advocating for cities and municipalities as the site of a lot of urban development and as our urban growth engine. So we really advocate for cities to have a bigger voice within the urban development scheme in South Africa. And a lot of the work is also centered around ensuring a well-governed network and ensuring the sustainable financial sustainability of the organization. So within the South African Cities Network, we have quite a few programs, and the vantage point I'm presenting from today is really from the Sustainable and Resilient Cities Network, but also because of my lens of inclusion and activating community voices within cities. I think it's important to bring those voices into this presentation as well. So really the Sustainable and Resilient Cities program focuses on sustainable urban development and urban resilience by investigating new ways that cities can mitigate and adapt to climate change, and also manages their resources more efficiently. So we do a lot of research in terms of looking at how cities can build resilience, especially to disasters and adapting to stresses and shocks. And also a lot around strengthening resilience and adaptive capacity to climate-related hazards and disasters, and also protecting critical ecological systems and ecosystems and natural resources that are dwindling within our cities. And we're also working to ensure the preparedness of both the physical city, but also in terms of the governance systems that need to be built in and kind of be resilient themselves to different kinds of shocks and stresses. Now, from a built environment perspective, you know, oppression in space can really lead to mental illness. And I think when we're looking at the kind of social structures that African cities have gone through, it's been quite oppressive, especially with coloniality and apartheid spatial planning. So I think from my vantage point, there's really a need to understand that space can heal and space can help us reconcile and negotiate. And we need to look at architecture as a tool of healing in the context of a pandemic, where we can see architecture as a first responder, especially where the living conditions of people are concerned. I think architecture and planning has a critical role to ensure that our cities are able to heal and communities are able to be empowered to resist the shocks that climate change imposes on them. So as a South African Cities Network, we are the Secretariat of the Integrated Urban Development Framework, which is a national policy in South Africa that's guiding how our cities should be developing in terms of making them more resilient, well-governed, sustainable, and inclusive. And one of the IEDF imperatives is to build the resilience of the poor and those in vulnerable situations, and to reduce their exposure to climate-related extreme events and other social, economic, and environmental shocks. So a lot of our perspective is really to say, when we talk about building resilience, it's important to build the resilience of the urban poor, because we've seen a lot of urbanization of poverty, especially with the growth of our cities. So I think in addressing the needs of the urban poor and ensuring that they have the tools to become more resilient and empowered within their own communities, then I think we are really going to make a lot of advances in terms of improving the conditions of the urban poor and those in vulnerable situations, even those with disabilities vulnerable groups within our cities. So I think COVID hit us when those conditions for resilience weren't there. And I think it's important to see the connection between the decline in mental health and how it coincides with an increase in environmental degradation. So it's important to, in terms of the elements of resilience, I think mental health and well-being is also quite important to ensure that people are enabled to be able to resist the shocks and kind of feel empowered to make improvements on their own living conditions. So it's really important to have an all of society and all of government approach to urban resilience and sustainability. And this is one of the pillars of the IUDF, the Integrated Urban Development Framework, because having an all of society approach where we understand that government can't do all of this work alone, and we need to have communities, business, and academia, and other civil society organizations assisting and working together with government to assist in making this, realizing this vision towards inclusion. So these images are from a film that was commissioned by the Socioeconomic Rights Institute in South Africa, together with the South African Cities Network. And it was really about profiling the experiences of women particularly, and people with disabilities living in informal settlements, on their experiences of access to sanitation and water within the settlements. And I think having access particularly to water and sanitation in the context of health and improving access to more green infrastructure is quite important to see how addressing the needs of those informal settlements in township areas and just vulnerable situations in cities can have a massive impact generally on the quality of life in South Africa, where we see that majority of people are living in poor conditions. And recently we found that 1 in 5 people living in informal cities within the city of Johannesburg, for example. So I think a lot of the needs that we need to address, it will be really critical and fundamentally really progressive to drive green infrastructure and the tools for resilience within these settlements where they are needed the most. So the marginalized and vulnerable groups in South Africa, including youth, women, and those of the LGBTQI persons, bear the brunt of poverty, inequality, and exclusion, which have been exacerbated obviously by COVID-19, and experience limited participation in urban processes. And the effects of climate change, such as drought, flash floods, and severe thunderstorms, for example, affect the poorest and most vulnerable, especially those living in informal settlements. And if we look at the current state of kind of the shortage of water, it also negatively affects crop yields, for example, and livestock, which in turn negatively affects on food security, and especially among the urban poor who are really unable to adjust to those resultant increases in food prices, for example, as a result of the climatic conditions that are changing. So to mitigate the impact of climate change and the ability to deliver services effectively and sustainably, I think cities really need to build resilience through a local and integrated approach, where we have all city departments, local stakeholders, and community engaging proactively to tackle the challenge of climate change. So that's really been our approach in terms of having an all of society approach and stance as the South African Cities Network, where we really listen and facilitate through co-creation, learning and innovation through partnerships amongst all stakeholders. I think we found that it's quite difficult for governments and local municipalities to partner, obviously because of the institutional frameworks and the legality and all of the issues around the finances of cities and how procurement is facilitated within our cities. But we found in a lot of our research that cities are not the best at partnering, but it's really great to include, like I said, local organizations or universities and business to assist cities to deliver on the quality of the whatever infrastructure or what is being provided to communities, where the municipality can provide the framework and deliver at scale. So I think it's the balancing between getting cities geared up to deliver for the scale and allow maybe organizations and smaller community organizations to deliver on the quality because they are closer to the communities that they are working in. So it's really about finding ways to navigate the system in a way that can really achieve the best results in terms of us building these resilient cities. So there's a lot in terms of what young people have been contributing historically to the development of our cities, and individually or even in organized and semi-organized structures, they are the ones who are actively involved in finding innovative solutions to problems within their community. And really, we know of a rich history of young people exercising their voice in discussions around education, climate change, and really the way that they want to see their role in cities. And this is an image from a recent protest that was held in the city of Cape Town in September this year, where young people organized a march to kind of speak up against the need, the frustrations that we are facing in cities. Like I said, young people bear the brunt of a lot of the negative effects of climate change and inequality and poverty. So having access to renewable energy and water and adequate sanitation is really one of the areas where young people are really speaking up. And I think it'll be important to facilitate and encourage these kinds of conversations. But however, the participation of young people at the moment in decision-making process is quite limited. And they have really few avenues through which to offer ideas and enable them to shape their own futures. And as a result of that, we've created a space within the Cities Network where we have a cohort of young people in the Gauteng city region, where we've kind of inducted them, I can say, in terms of how city processes work and where they can exercise their rights and how a municipality actually works. What are the decision-making channels and how they can influence those kinds of spaces. So there's been quite a lot of work that we're doing in terms of the youth and city space program that we have within the Inclusive Cities program at the Cities Network, where we're really trying to empower young people to see their role within their local government system, to contribute their ideas to the city development and the kinds of futures that they want to contribute towards. I want to move now to some of the case studies of projects that we have supported as a Cities Network through this integrated urban development framework seed funding. So just a bit of background, we have a partnership with the National Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, COGTA for short, where we are working together in terms of the IUDF, in terms of implementing it. A lot of times we have policies that people don't really see themselves in, they don't kind of understand, or we don't have the ground level implications of what this IUDF policy will look like. So we put out a call 2 years ago already for any social entrepreneurs, community-led projects, small projects that are starting or started that need support, that really address the issues that we are facing in our cities from whatever perspective. So as I said, the pillars of the IEDF are really around inclusion and creating well-governed cities, but also being sustainable and ensuring that we promote access to good quality education, transportation, and just improving the well-being and living conditions in cities. So with this view of having this big vision of transformed cities that are so integrated and resilient and sustainable in our cities, we put out this call across the country for young people to contribute their ideas and submit proposals for projects that they want to fund within their communities. So this is one of the projects that we funded. It's called Open Oceans. And it's based in eThekwini, which I'm quite excited to share since we're hosted by eThekwini for this World Planning Day. So this project was really about the port of Durban and the circular economy. So Durban has the busiest port in Africa that's contributing to around 11% of South Africa's GDP. However, pollution in the port of Durban and its waterways is a problem for the local municipality. And in response, Open Oceans uses technology and powerful storytelling to inform municipal policy and decision-making and empower small businesses and also bring informal waste pickers into the mainstream. And we know they contribute a lot to the recycling in our cities, but also we need to include them in the mainstream of the circular economy. So the activities around this project were really designed to integrate different forms of waste and to promote a more circular approach to the economy, bringing together various actors in the waste management system. So in this project, they actually used drones and image data that enables a better understanding of the cycles of plastic pollution and assists informal waste pickers operating in the arena to plan their collection cycles by informing them when to collect. So for example, this table here below kind of maps the different rivers within the city. So you have Umlazi, Umgeni, Mhlatuzana, and Umbilo River. And it just maps basically, it's about understanding where the waste that's going into rivers comes from and kind of targeting at the source and educating the communities in that area about waste and how it can be used as a resource within their communities. So this data is available and was able to be used by informal waste pickers to say by the kind of rainflow and the average surface or the emissions and the rainfall and just the data that was collected can inform the informal waste pickers' collection cycles and assist them to kind of plan better around their cycles and how they can collect waste within the city. So even further to that, this project was able to partner with the local lab where they developed eyewear from recycled waste. And this was to address the impact of poor sight on children's literacy. So this is where you see the kind of, the interrelated nature of kind of sustainability and resilience, where it's not just about the waste or the economy in terms of the recyclers and reclaimers or the municipality in terms of managing the waste, but how can we use this problem of plastic to create an advocacy tool to assist children within townships and informal areas with this plastic waste. So they created a whole program where they brought in these children to collect this waste and then go to the Makers Lab to create the frames for their glasses. So that's continued to be a partnership with the local optometrist who's assisting to do the test and pilot this innovation. So this is something that we're really proud of in terms of how it demonstrates a better integrated waste management system and how it's possible, and how through partnership and innovation, we can emerge with real products that can solve social and distributive health issues. So this project is also validated kind of eThekwini's potential to be a capital of innovation and the kinds of things and opportunities that can emerge from the circular economy, and just improving awareness in terms of plasticpreneurship, economic opportunities within the city. And so this is another project that is based in the city of Cape Town, and it's called the Langa Bicycle Hub. And this project was really about demonstrating, it's basically a bicycle shop where people can fix their bicycles, but also they teach cycling lessons and to promote the culture of cycling within the city of Cape Town, and especially in the informal settlements and the township of Langa at large. And really what's quite exciting about this project is the spin-off effects that have occurred. So on the bottom left, that picture is at the taxi rank in Langa, where they were speaking to the taxi drivers to incorporate and kind of just raise awareness about cycling and teaching them cycling safety, how the cyclists communicate. So there's also the Langa Bicycle Patrol that's emerged from this movement, where there are there's a Langa Safety Patrol, there's a community safety patrol group that's emerged that's operating on these bicycles and connecting with the police in the area to assist in curbing crime and fighting crime within the area. And a third business that's actually emerged from this clean kind of energy movement, this clean transport movement that's emerged is a delivery service where they were actually started during the lockdown, delivering medicines to the community and delivering groceries, assisting the elderly. And a lot of kind of employment opportunities, especially for young people, have emerged through this. So this is really an advocacy tool that demonstrates the different kinds of partnerships can create a wider impact for the project, and especially in townships where access to resources is really limited, and the importance of partnerships to facilitate more economic growth. So there's the transport element in terms of the actual bicycling, but then there's the how to use this as a tool to now create a more safer community using bicycles, and how to create a more connected community with the viable delivery service that's based on kind of zero emissions transport. So this is something that we're also really proud of, and really feel that we should be supporting more of these kinds of initiatives to build the resilience of communities, to enable them to kind of handle their own shocks and just improve their own kind of quality of life. Because I think the first presenter was speaking about in terms of the different elements around relating to health and transport and education, and all these different softer social elements that contribute towards building resilience are really important if we really want to see communities taking ownership of their own spaces and being empowered to drive the change that they want to see. And then I just wanted to share this last project, which is called—
Ms. Siwe, may I just pop in,
Yes.
please? Please, can you round up in 1-2 minutes so that we could have
Absolutely.
like 5 minutes for questioning?
Yes.
Because of other speaker. All right, thank you.
Thank you. So this project was really about demonstrating the power of connecting contemporary Africa to nature, farming, and collective healing. So this was a project that did urban tours across the city of Joburg, and which is really kind of not, we don't really think of Joburg as a farming city, a producing city that can feed itself. So this project was highlighting the different urban farms across the city that need to be connected, and really advancing the concept of ecotherapy within the city, connecting to the more natural elements of the city within the city, and promoting that and ensuring people understand their role in this space, but also advancing how we can be better connected to ourselves as a way of building resilience within our cities. And even this connection to promoting mental health and well-being is increasingly important, especially in the context of environmental degradation, where we see a lot of mental health issues emerging, especially because of the lack of access to green spaces. So I think this was also quite exciting to see this work and the potential to connect young people to other commercial opportunities through these tours. So I think it's quite important for us to put green on the urban agenda to really ensure that we have more integrated systems of planning around resilience. And I know the city of eThekwini has a transversal management approach where there's a pot of funding that can only be accessed if the different departments work together and ensure that they will use the money in an integrated fashion. So I think that's quite important in us advocating for the different kind of city that we want to see, and building resilience in poor communities is building resilience for the city, and cities really urgently need to invest differently in urban infrastructure and place green infrastructure firmly on the local urban policy agenda. And I think it's important to build the capacity and leadership capacity of these young people who are driving the kind of change that we want to see within our cities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I know this issue is very close to your heart. I was very careful not to disturb you too much. However, without wasting time, I'll quickly call on Dr. Okunla. I'll read through his biography. I hope he will be able to present in about 15 minutes so that we could have the additional 15 minutes before you both of you have a load shedding for engagement. Dr. Okunla is a postdoctoral fellow with the Global Change Institute of University of Witwatersrand. He's also a senior research officer focused on disaster risk reduction and resilience specialist at the Institute of Land and Community Resilience. He's also at the Federal University of Technology in Minna, Nigeria. He has expertise in issues around disaster resilience in the urban area. He's focused on understanding resilience in context of sociological and scientific explanation. Dr. Okunla is well published. He's an urban public affairs analyst across the globe. He has won various grants to Ghana, South Africa, France, Saudi Arabia, and England. So, colleagues, permit me to welcome Dr. Okunla to present his slide and his presentation titled Community Resilience to Flood Disaster in Lagos, Nigeria. Welcome, Mr. Okunla. We hope that you'll be able to finish in 15 minutes so that we can engage.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. And thanks so much for giving me this wonderful opportunity to present my research on community resilience to flood disaster in Lagos, Nigeria. Previous scholars have really talked about how we can make our cities to be inclusive, smart, and resilient, and the same spirit. I will be presenting a study that was conducted late last year to the audience. Can you see my screen?
We can see your screen, but it would be good if you put it in the slideshow. So yes, perfect. Thank you, sir.
All right, thanks so much. Before I present the findings, let me quickly introduce us to various issues that surround flood and urban resilience in cities of Global South. In recent years, exposure of human settlement to flood risk is increasing as a result of climate change, sea level rise, extreme precipitation, development intensification, and rapid population growth. And as a result, flood is a global phenomenon which have been reported across continents in the last decade, most especially in Asian countries, African countries, as well as European countries, with substantial economic and social costs, highlighting the urgent need to actually manage various consequences of flood According to the International Disaster Database, over 200 deaths have been recorded in the last 3 decades. And also here in Africa, the ongoing flood in the neighboring countries of Sudan and South Sudan have reportedly affected more than 700 people. Also, in Nigeria, this year, we have had a report of over 100,000 people that have been directly affected as a result of flash flooding in Adamawa State, that is situated in the northern part of Nigeria. Also, we have in July, it was reported that more than 130 people lost their life in the flood occurrence that happened in Germany and some other neighboring countries. As a result of this succession of flood, there is need to actually embark on long-term flood resilience and management interventions. And over the years, several scholars, international organizations, and various institutions have postulated that the most viable and complementary ways of managing the impact of flood relies on community resilience. And talking about community resilience, in this particular study, I conceptualize community resilience to major 3 components. The first component has to do with resources and capacities. Talking about resources and capacities, this study refers to resources and capacity in terms of socio-political, financial, physical, as well as human capital and resources. And the second component has to do with actions in terms of civil protection, as related to flood preparedness, response, recovery, as well as mitigation strategies. And the third component of community resilience in this study has to do with learning. And talking about learning, I refer to learning as a risk and loss perception, critical reflection on the appropriateness of different types of approach, as well as experimentation and innovation, and monitoring and review. These are the major 3 components whereby I actually assessed community resilience to flood in Lagos, Nigeria. Talking about Lagos, it is situated in the southwestern geopolitical zone of Nigeria. Presently, it has been stated that Lagos has about 26 million people, and the city is a coastal city and the hub of commercial activities in Nigeria. Some people refer to Lagos as the engine room of Nigeria. And basically, because it is a coastal city, it has been identified as one of the top 10 global cities with high risk from climate change effects. And this year alone, it has been reported that more than 20 households have been displaced as a result of perpetual flood occurrence in the cities. So because of the time, I would like to go straight to how the data for this study was obtained. Specifically, purposive sampling method was used to actually select 3 residential densities that represent low, medium, and high income residential densities. So in terms of low income residential densities, I selected Ijora. Ijora is an informal settlement that is dominated by low income earners based on previous studies. And Surulere is a mix of commercial activities and residential. So, and the third community that was selected is an high-brown area of Lagos State, that is Lekki Peninsula, where majority of the people living there are high-income earners. And based on this, both survey and in-depth interviews were utilized to be able to obtain the necessary data for this particular study. And I actually focused on household heads and those that have been living in the communities for minimum of 10 years. This was based on the fact that people that have been living in a particular area for about 10 years will be able to tell us salient information about impact of flood and what has been done to actually mitigate and prevent the occurrence of flood in the communities. And the data for this study were analyzed using both descriptive and inferential statistics. Based on the data collected, we realized that there are significant differences in socioeconomic and demographic characteristics of residents that are living in the 3 selected communities. For example, it was observed that there is a variation in the level of income in the selected cities. Take, for instance, in Ijora, it was discovered that the average monthly income of respondents was around 30,000 naira, while that of Surulere was 95,000 naira. And the average monthly income of residents or respondents in Lekki Peninsula was around 179,000 naira. And it was also discovered that there is a variation in household size across the 3 residential areas that were selected for this particular study. For instance, it was observed that the average household size in Lekki Peninsula was 5.2, while the average household size in Surulere was 4.5. And that of Ijora, which is an informal settlement, was around 10.2. And it was also discovered that there was low level of preparedness in terms of risk and vulnerability assessments in the selected communities. Based on the level of awareness, we realized and observed that there was low level of awareness in terms of what the stakeholders need to do in preventing and managing the impact of flood occurrence in the selected cities. And majorly, I discovered that the prevention strategy for flood prevention were in terms of obtaining relevant information from media houses about flood and presence of temporary shelter locations in and around some the selected communities. And it was also observed that the least preventive strategies adopted in the communities were in terms of provision of more provision of more resilient infrastructure in terms of rain gardens, green walls, green roofs, and access to inclusive formal safety nets, such as government and from government and humanitarian agencies. And based on the strategies adopted to adjust to the impact of flood, we realized that seeking financial assistance to mitigate flood impact and living with damaged or affected communities' infrastructure were the major strategies adopted by respondents to adjust to the impact of flood in the selected communities. And also on the strategies adopted to transform the impact of flood occurrence in the selected city, we realized that provision of more structural and sound buildings, as well as provision of more resilient community infrastructure, such as roads, water supply, health centers, school, were identified as the main strategies to develop their communities after flood events. And based on this, I concluded that flood resilience approach was not effective in the city of Lagos as a result of low preparedness and lack of awareness among residents on flood preparedness and mitigation. So I based on that, I recommended that flood preparedness measures need to be community-driven and risk-informed. As I said earlier, in terms of community resilience, supposed to be an inclusive inclusive approach whereby residents, community groups, government and non-governmental organizations needs to work together to be able to mitigate and prevent the impact of flood. I also recommended strengthening community flood resilience requires a process that is multi-sectoral and that involves numerous actors. As we all know, based on what other presenters have said, in terms of building resilience, it involves multiple stakeholders. In terms of government and non-governmental organizations, in terms of people in the community, as well as representative of the communities. Non-governmental organizations are not excluded from this particular approach. So, and I also recommended that local leaders are observed to be closer to the people more than even the government and non-governmental organizations. So they need to mobilize their community members in order to be able to participate effectively in risk and vulnerability assessments, to be able to build an inclusive, smart, and resilient community. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to present my short study. Thank you.
For your informed presentation. Questions? Dr. Okwala just presented to us on issues around flood resilience in Lagos. And Lagos being a mega city in Africa and also very known city across the globe. But before I start entertaining other people's question, Dr. Okwala, I want to ask, maybe that will form part of the question also. Are you of the view that this preparedness is poverty related? Just have that thought, hold that thought at the back of your mind. Looking at I know you didn't actually give us a full spatial explanation of the level of preparedness across the study areas. But I just want to have an idea, maybe it was poverty related in more areas, a particular area or not, or inequality, if we might say. Having said that, I will suggest that we have these questions together so that we can save time. We'll go with Dr. Okwala first. Questions, engagement, things that we want to clarify so that it takes it at a shot. And we'll come back to Ms. Siwe. I'm not seeing any hand up. You can type it or chat. All right, as we wait for other questions, maybe Dr. Okwala, maybe you could respond to that. Then,
yeah, thank you so much for that wonderful question. Based on our findings, poverty, talking about poverty, it is not necessarily the major factor influencing preparedness, level of preparedness. For instance, the communities selected for these particular studies represent different income groups. Ijora is a low-income community. Surulere is regarded as a middle-income community, while Lekki is also regarded as high-income communities. And based on what we observed and our findings, there was low level of preparedness in all the communities, in the three communities. So we cannot categorically say that poverty is a major factor influencing preparedness in that particular. But based on some other studies that have been conducted in and outside Nigeria, they have established that your level of income may determine how prepared you are and how informed you are to take active and required actions as regard prevention, mitigation, and preparedness towards flood occurrence.
Thank you very much. Because we are very critical about the topic, the place of co-production of space. You can't be talking about co-production when the local people are handicapped. So that was very essential. Ms. Siwe, questions for Ms. Siwe, engagement. Questions? I'm not seeing a hand up. And I can't see any question in my chat. I guess most of us are green agenda advocates. So we so much love what Ms. Siwe presented. Questions? All right, colleagues. I don't know, maybe Dr. Iliasu, sorry, is here now. Dr. Iliasu, maybe you want to respond to the question that Masile both raised the other time. I don't know, maybe we were able to get the question. Dr. Iliasu, are you here with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
Okay, did you get the question?
Yeah, I got the question.
Okay, please, would you respond to it before? Yeah. All right.
Okay, fine. Good afternoon again. Yeah, I was.
I'll suggest you switch off your video. We can't hear you. The network. Hello, Dr. Iliasu.
And
Dr. Iliasu.
Sustainable urban design is a paradigm shift that is ongoing now.
Dr. Iliasu, if you can hear us,
the concept of
we cannot hear you. Your network is squabbled, so we are finding it difficult to hear you.
Okay, I can hear you. Are you with me?
All right, let's just come back to you.
Can you hear me? Yes, I'm with you. Are you with me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Please
Hello.
leave just off the video.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello.
Hi, doctor. Please go ahead.
Yes. Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Hello.
Colleagues, Dr. Iliasu will come back. Colleagues, these are some of the advantages and disadvantages of the internet conference, which we find ourselves now. We must be able to understand. I'm not seeing any hand yet, engagement with regards to this. I just want to salute the South African City Networks for the seed funding which was provided. We must understand that I'm an advocate of urban agriculture. So I'm somewhat enthused with Johannesburg bringing about greenhouse farming as a means to providing food for those that are in it and a source of livelihood, which is very critical to resilience. Colleagues, I'll quickly provide an overview in the absence of no question. We started with the presentation by Dr. Patrick, where we emphasized the place that African climate body and stress is evident across Africa. He pointed at the issues around democracy of resilience. And I asked myself a question. Could it be because some of the local villages are experiencing or have some climate shock? That was why they didn't vote for a particular party. Maybe, maybe not. But that's my view, by the way. Space can be healed, and planning takes an important role in spatial healing. Colleagues, in the absence of no questions and engagement, I would want to bring an end to this section. We want to thank you for joining us in this room, Resilient City. We hope that you have been informed and much more educated with regards to bringing about and achieving a resilient city within the theme or the broad topic of this World Planning Day conference or symposium, as the case might be. The third theme has been strengthening the co-production paradigm in planning, promoting government and citizen participation. The four presenters have highlighted the role of the government. They have pointed out the local people is also critical to achieving a resilient city. They have pointed out that organizations are very important to creating a balance between what the Europeans or the case might be, the multinationals might bring and what the people actually need. So we need a balance within this framework. Colleagues, we appreciate you for joining us. And I believe other rooms are still active. Should you be interested in joining another room, the links is being provided in the chat box here, which you can easily join any of the room 1, room 2, room 3. You can easily join any of them. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow. We are coming tomorrow for a complete overview. If you miss any of the room, tomorrow we'll serve a platform where you can be informed on what was discussed in room 1, what was discussed in room 2, and other rooms also, such that we bring about a more informed planning decision, a more informed planning ideology, and a more informed planning education. Colleagues, thank you very much on behalf of the chair, Mr. Emmanuel Letebele. I thank you for joining us, and I hereby bring this room to a close. See you tomorrow, and also please endeavor to join other rooms. Thank you.
Um, load shedding. Load shedding. Now. It's gone. Mm. Right. How was the paper? Ndiyalungisa meeting. So what are you writing? You're confident with the mess. Stage 4 load shedding. Until just get another work. Kaloku unomusa, you know unomusa, lo ndihamba naye. Bona, they are across a shell house. So a shell house, they don't have a backup. Our offices have got a backup. So vese bentenzo hamba naye wathi unomusa mina ndiyaguduka ndathi ndihamba. Cha ke benifuna ulantu hayi ndithengeke link You know, person calculators are this can. The other one is 20 pages, and that is also I never do that. No. So now I'm phoning Lontomas, and so no Musa Sapuma, Sayala Payan, Bapa opposite Pizza Boys. So in Damnigas, so also sign alone, then I'll be saying 2 million copies.
Oh, yes, I see.
So that been diaconag. By look in country that there is no way. But we invent that no in network. Network so that no Musa must caliper in Uchangi PM no Musa. I evolve for it's too much. Evolve for himself if I am. Uchange last year, we wouldn't go get of nega but 12,000 ut in that and getting the pink. It's very expensive. Land was a fall. Very. Aye, shame. Nam dithe kuye ka buthe befuna uthenge le yabona this new X1 le X1 it's beautiful zinhle moto BM to khupha imoto ezinhle ulithanda lokuthanda iBM beautiful iX1 ubefuna ke then ubefuna iVolvo S60 yabona endithandayo cash price yakhona expensive and xa sowuya kwi-parts no X660 XC60 ndiphakamileyo so ubefuna yona ndithe kunomusa as much as ndithanda iVolvo ndihleli kwaVolvo because of uColin ka other than that nje I will never ndithi mna kwaVolvo ndiyofunani lapho kwaVolvo kaloku usavula umnyango 5,000 ndithi ndizoyithatha ku-5,000 usawuvula jukela 5,000 sayibo ndiyithatha phi no never. So nje bensitsho nami kuye ndithi uthi you know my heart uthi I cried the day I left my into uthi nangoku I'm driving this car uthi no I'm not into it uthi I'm not into it once you drive iVolvo nje any moto as much as uthi it's financially nje other than that nje ebengeke because once iphume ku-maintenance ukuhlala into engaka nje uthi nje 3.5 ayikafakwa there's no way it's too expensive very expensive with Toyota and Honda kabalo bensitsho kulindo ndithi ngeke ngoku because I've got other things endizifunayo kukho esa stage where you enjoy cars I've enjoyed them salphinde enjoy ngoku ndinezinye priorities nje I just want a nice reliable car so uColin ke uthi yesterday uyithathile imoto wayenza wafaka into because efuna ukwenza the pressure whatever uthi uthi akho nenye ephumileyo uthi still na into uthi wayidriver to Springfield so wayishiya uthi ubethe kuseni uzofika mhlawumbe amanzi aphumile uthi awekho
what was it then?
No idea. I've got no idea because last time kaloku wade wafaka that thing like a dye ukuziphume on the side baloku icolor khona was greenish so iyastaineka apho ukuze ayibone ukuthi oh this is into iyaphosa iphuma kancinci but caba yayithi xa imoto in pressure iphume kakhulu but apha kungabikho nto then iphole xa ufika uyibhaka izithulele imoto when is driving pressure iyalantuka ke iyayikhupha then kuphele iphinde ibe right so ngoku that is where we're like how come that lamanzi ehle because xa ufaka icoolant it's when you sebenzisa i-air conditioner or when it's hot, then ke iya isehla. Ngokuyana ke ibivele yehle. Kanti when it's like driving, i-pressure iya a little bit. Ubendikubuza mina kalo benzothi phuma uye e-gateway. Yes, wena wathi uzophuma u-through uhambe no-Team Ngofu. Ubani xesha ngoku no e-gateway yabo ngoku xesha ngubani? So 2:30. I'm just too tired. Mna andikho tired.